When Venus is in Virgo, our tolerance to toxicity decreases while our sensitivity increases. And in 2026, this is magnified by intense aspects to other transits. Is this a comfortable situation? Most likely not. However, it's a necessary step to prepare us for Venus retrograde in the fall. In fact, if you take care of yourself and manage the situations you're in well when Venus is in Virgo, Venus's ingress into Libra on August 7th will be magical. Venus in Virgo is usually one of my favorite transits, but I think this year it's going to test us a bit. So Venus enters Virgo on July 9th and will exit the sign on August 6th. And the reason I think this transit is going to create tension is that there are a lot of squares and oppositions that are happening while she's in the sign. So the relationship to the other planets is these tense degrees, which are either a direct opposition, 180 degrees, or a square, which is 90 degrees. However, I'm going to tell you all about this energy and what to expect. But when you're listening to me show you this, remember that when Venus enters Libra on August 7th, we're going to immediately flip the switch to a very good adjustment. This is a part of the kite formation I've identified on the channel for many years. This is in relation to the outer planets, Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune that have just switched signs. I'll show you guys in August. As Venus moves towards Libra and through Libra, she's approaching her retrograde position, which is going to be from Scorpio through to the last decan, the last 10 degrees of Libra. So the 20th through the 30th degree of Libra. So when she switches into Libra, she activates the kite, which is going to be a very nice alignment for all the stress that's going to be created while she's in Virgo. And then she's going to approach later on in Libra, the retrograde position, and that's going to be a big adjustment. Again, we'll get to that in September. Overall, I want you to think of this energy in this way. In Virgo, it's going to kick up a lot of dust, okay? There's going to be a lot of things that are going to come up that are going to be this and that. We'll talk about it in a minute. When she enters Libra at the beginning of August, that's going to be very nice, okay? And then once she moves forward again towards the last 10 degrees of Libra, that's when we get into the retrograde territory, and it's going to be very similar to this energy now in a way. So the 9 of Pentacles is Venus in Virgo. It rules this card. So I thought for those of you who are newer to astrology, this would help to ground you in the energy. And it looks nice. She's carrying a bird. She's surrounded by a bunch of pentacles, which represent money. She's wearing a nice outfit. So what could go wrong, right? In the card, she's depicted as healthy and happy. You can see the flowers on her dress. They look like little signs of Venus. So it's a very nice card, one of the prettier cards on the deck. And if you look closely, there's even a little snail right over here, right at her feet. So typical interpretations of this tarot card is that she's healthy, she's happy, she's self-sufficient. But this is where we come into the problem when it comes to the 9 of Pentacles. In the 9 of Pentacles, a person is willing to choose financial security over any relationship or emotional ties. So when it comes to decisions, she is happier to choose her security, which is all the monetary stuff and the non-problematic bird, the bird that's not going to talk back to her like a person would. And so in her decision-making, value supersedes emotions. And that's the problem, because ultimately we do want to make sure that we're safe and happy and secure. But when we isolate ourselves to make these kinds of decisions, then this could be a short-lived happiness, because sooner or later, we as social creatures need each other. So she's isolating in false comfort. Under Venus in Virgo, to do with this card, some people have a tendency to make decisions towards prosperity without considering the impact on the indirect prosperity, the social prosperity in their lives, connections with other people. And this card may represent being overly picky, dismissing people before giving them a chance, choosing to go with a safer option and saying no to social connections. That can lead to sad consequences for people when you look around and you find yourself alone with money, a dress, a bird. This is actually really hard to tell you guys because to me it sounds pretty good. So, but you get my point that when we put too much emphasis over money beyond people, choosing money over people, we tend to create for ourselves some kind of a trap. So that's Venus in Virgo. She's debilitated in Virgo. So debilitation just means that she's in the opposite sign that she rules. So she's in a weaker sign. Virgo is a weaker sign for Venus. But like I said, it's one of my favorite cards, and to me, this seems like a perfect situation. Like, you got a bird, you got a dress, you got some coins, you're good, right? So it sounds like not a bad situation, and you have a snail. So here's a good question for Venus and Virgo. How do we know that we are loved? And this is the sign for Venus. This is the sign for Virgo. In Virgo, Venus starts to measure everything. So she starts to measure actions over words, which is actually a good idea. She starts to look at the bread and butter of a situation and saying, what is actually in this relationship? What is this person doing to show love, friendship, and positive engagement? Venus in Virgo asks the question of the relationship between actions and words. So again, not problematic at all. It's actually like a really good way to look at relationships. But when we finally look at the actions versus the words, sometimes we come into abrupt clarity about an issue, that the words that we're hearing are not aligning with the behaviors that we are seeing. Venus in Virgo also focuses on value. So this starts to ask the question, like, what kind of value is this relationship, whether it's love, friendship, family, what kind of value is this relationship bringing to me? It's kind of a harsh way to look at things, but it's necessary. And especially if you're a woman or if you are a person who is marginalized in any way, you have to think about value because you're already contextualized in a system that marginalizes you, that's hard enough to live in on its own. So it's necessary to ask ourselves, is this relationship bringing value, or is this relationship robbing me blind of time? So you become totally aware of time that you're wasting in certain situations, which is actually putting your security in danger in the long term. So under Venus and Virgo, people have these realizations that the situations they're in are not serving their best interest. This reminds me of the recent Mercury and Mars alignment, and I mentioned this in the previous video, and we'll do a dedicated video on this because I think it's actually really important. Between 2015, October or November, and April 2026, Mercury and Mars made 5 different conjunctions over a period of 6 months. These conjunctions aligned our words and our actions. And this happens periodically every 2 years. Sometimes once in a while, it happens every 5 times. So sometimes the sequence is 1, sometimes the sequence is 2, but very rarely it is 5 times. So this was one of these super rare alignments. This is the first time Venus is in Virgo since that alignment happened. And so the focus on behavior checked against words or intentions, as people say, is being reviewed by Venus in Virgo. So one of the aspects that Venus makes while she is in Virgo will be a square to Mars. This is their opening square, the first in their planetary cycle since they had the conjunction at the beginning of the year. So Venus will be in Virgo and Mars is going to be in Gemini, creating the square. This creates a natural tension between what we are doing. And remember, Mars just had its conjunction with Uranus, and it's all gassed up to take random adventures and try different things. So between what we are doing, which is represented by Mars, and where our heart is, which is represented by Virgo, or by Venus, sorry. So before we go through today's video fully, I want to tell you the outcome so you know what to prepare for. So we know that when Venus reaches Libra, it becomes okay. But the entire transit in Virgo is full of mishaps and problems. The outcome is going to be liminal. The situations that you're going to find yourself in over this 1 month period, they're not going to resolve most likely by the time she reaches Libra. You have to wait for Libra and then Venus retrograde for those things to sort themselves out. I do have a transit that's going to come up near the end of her transit that is going to help things along. So I'll tell you about that in just a minute. But expect at the end of the month, at the beginning of August, some degree of doubt to remain in terms of your relationships. In fact, the last aspect that Venus makes, I'm telling you the bad part first, so this is the bad part, is a square to Lilith. Lilith is the moon's furthest position from the earth. Lilith is a lack of satisfaction or clarity in a situation. It is the furthest position of the moon, so don't expect an answer in untreaded territory. In other words, you are going to be left at the end of this transit with questions about your relationships. However, I promise you, when Venus enters Libra, there's going to be a positive shift with regard to all that. So here are some things to focus on when Venus is in Virgo. So really focus on who is good for you and who you need out of your life. Discernment. It's a time to cut your losses, especially when Venus passes the South Node and joins the Moon. I'll tell you guys about that in a minute. So you're meant to choose the hard path. If a relationship is not serving you, it needs to go right away. And in some of these situations, these are going to be hard decisions, uncomfortable decisions, things that you don't necessarily want to do, but you know you should do. Make sure to focus on your health and self and well-being. So instead of focusing on where your relationships are flowing to, focus on taking care of yourself. The amount to which you can take care of yourself while Venus is in Virgo will directly flow into how well Venus in Libra turns out for you. So it will just magnify the positivity of the beginning of this transit, especially if you have placements in the first 10 degrees, or for the rest of us in the first 10 degrees or the first decan of Libra. That means in August. So under this transit, what typically happens for people is, and whether you have Virgo placements or not, your tolerance to anything that's negative decreases and your sensitivity increases. So that's what makes this transit super uncomfortable at times, because it basically wakes you up to the state of your reality. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these energies. We have Cancer, which is the Chariot. Sign of Cancer rules this card. This means overcoming things that you were feeling uncomfortable about in the past, something that you were holding back from doing. Then we have the Two of Swords. That's Moon in Libra. That's going to be very important when Venus enters Libra and the Moon joins her there. I think that you're overcoming something that's quite uncomfortable for you, and maybe you're left in a space in which you don't know where the future is. In fact, the download has been showing up or the symbol everywhere that we have to be uncomfortable with uncertainty when moving forward. So not everything is guaranteed like a movie with a happy ending or an ending at all. Life just kind of rolls along. So you have to move forward in this space unsure of where things will go. And this is within relationships. So with someone, you may have a big question mark in terms of where that relationship is going or where you stand. You may be feeling like there's a new beginning there, but there's no confirmation, right? Not always, and it takes some time for things to work themselves out. If you're seeking a lot of confirmation, you're putting yourself in a dangerous position because the people who will give you confirmation about your relationship are usually some kind of player, some kind of manipulator, because they know that that's what you're looking for. So they are the only ones who are willing to give you false hope. So the people that you actually should be open to may not be open to give you a guarantee or make you a promise because they genuinely don't know. So that's what I'm getting. Like the honest answer is that I don't know in this situation. And if someone's promising you this and that, that's what you need to be wary of. Then we have the Two of Wands. Definitely looking forward towards the future. I think that I'm getting the feeling that there's a need here to be with yourself, to think about things, to see how things move forward. This may be involving a situation involving a Cancer, a person who has Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Rising. And then we have the Knight of Cups, a Pisces, Cancer, Scorpio. There's someone coming through with some kind of offer to you. So maybe by the end of the transit, you are going to hear something. In the next section, I'll tell you about Venus and Mercury, and that's important. So maybe you're just waiting out Mercury retrograde to hear from this person. I'll explain that in a minute, but that's a confirmation of that transit that's coming up. Okay, so right at the beginning of this transit on July 9th, it actually starts off in a very good energy. Regulus is a fixed star in the first degrees of Virgo. It is one of the most lucky stars in the whole zodiac. It's associated with kings, royalty, success, honors, leadership. So Venus will pass Regulus, and that's usually a fairly lucky transit. But then she also makes a trine to Chiron. That's in Taurus. We've been talking about Chiron. That's the wounded healer. So in Taurus, Chiron has a lot to do with money. It's a long-term cycle that's just beginning, that's going to last 7 years. And it's going to be addressing our issues with resources, money, wealth, and physical health. This trine between Venus and Chiron is going to be your insight into your financial and physical state of affairs. This is a positive thing because it'll be your awareness about the next 7 years. So under this trine, you're going to have your aha moment, and you'll find out exactly what you need to be looking out for when Chiron re-enters Taurus. So Chiron is in Taurus, it will move out of Taurus and then re-enter later. But right now you're going to have a really good opportunity here to understand what you need to improve on, especially include in terms of your wealth and your health. So the transit starts well with a point of awareness and a strong conjunction with a very lucky star, but then it sort of goes downhill from there. So Venus will pass the South Node on July 11th at 2 degrees Virgo. This is important because on February 20th, we get a solar eclipse in this exact same degree. So between July 11th through February 20th, there's an energy that's building up in this position of the sky, 2 degrees Virgo, that Venus is the first major transit to activate. Under this transit, you may experience conflicts with loved ones over the most minute details. Take notice of this. If it's really irrelevant, then try to remove the energy of conflict from your relationship. You may start noticing darker aspects of your friendship's characters during that time. maybe you have been ignoring how they've been treating you or how they've been behaving. Leading up to February 20th, those observations are going to become intolerable, not because you're being picky, but because you're recognizing exactly what to protect yourself from. And it's likely, depending on the situation, that by February 20th, you're going to try to remove yourself from any situation that is raising those warning signs. Especially between July 11th and February 20th, you're going to start noticing karmic patterns within your relationships. So you're going to start noticing things about people and situations, about how they do things, about how their actions are not matching what they're saying, and they're going to become intolerable. So there's going to be a purge. That's what I'm saying. And especially when Venus is retrograde, there's going to be a big purge in your social sphere, whether it's relationships, romance, partnership, family, any social connection. Another thing that may happen during this time is that we may tend towards reliance on alternative medicine, meditation, without actually addressing the underlying problems. So bypassing issues, avoiding problems, whether that's you or people around you. Playing with crystals and things like that is a wonderful supplement, but not if you're avoiding the core problems. So this transit, Venus past the South Node, is going to really be digging up any toxic behaviors that people around you or that you may rely on to get through situations, to avoid accountability, to avoid facing the issue. During this time, clutter may increase in your life, just knickknacks and volume of things, people, and just situations. It's a cluttery time, full of clutter. And some people, depending on the placement of this position, 2 degrees Virgo, may experience an increase in overworking, but kind of like a workaholic, working more without getting the benefit of it. So that's Venus conjunct the South Node. It opens up a Pandora's box of energy. And the major cathartic point will be February 20th, 2027. So the energy isn't bad per se, but it's just starts to add more and more things for you to unpack and resolve. And in between the eclipse, the full moon eclipse, okay? And now we also get a Venus retrograde, which is always a big deal. So Venus in Virgo isn't a problem. It's just from the kind of chill and easy Venus in Cancer and Venus in Leo, suddenly the pressure starts to pick up. So between July 11th and the 13th, Venus is going to form squares to Sedna and Uranus. Essentially, Sedna and Uranus are in the same area of the sky. Sedna is at 2 degrees of Virgo and Uranus is at 4 degrees of Gemini. Sedna is at 2 degrees of Gemini. Sedna's story, she's an asteroid, has a lot to do with family betrayal, being cast out, and a powerful transformation into her elevated form, which is that of a storm goddess. But she only gets there by a massive betrayal. I'll tell you guys about that in another video. Uranus is the planet of change and transformation. It's just formed a conjunction with Mars. It's bending the node, so it's more erratic and more intense at this time. So both of these planets are in Gemini. So you may be experiencing betrayal by siblings or cousins. This may be a disclosure of a past betrayal or possibly a betrayal that's underway, but it could create distance in your relationship. There may be change in management at your job from a friendly boss, a cozy person with whom you have good relationship, to something that's more cold and distant, more corporate and impersonal. So you go from a position in which you feel comfy and comfortable in your workspace to a place where suddenly you don't feel so warm and fuzzy. Events may come up that may make you feel uncomfortable and want you to protect your assets and value. So to shut down, to protect, you may see things happening around you that make you super nervous and want you to protect yourself. This is between July 11th and the 13th. Overall, I would expect some of you to experience a loss in trust in your whole environment. Something comes up that kind of shocks you and makes you question, what are you actually doing there? So it's definitely an uncomfortable transit, probably the most uncomfortable transit alongside the Venus South Node conjunction, which happens essentially on the same day. So it's kind of happening together. Okay, so let's take a look at the Mary L. Tarot. It's a darker deck and sometimes gives like the underbelly in a situation. So first we have the Hanged Man. Yeah, that's a very good card for this transit. It depicts delays and kind of waiting for timing. It's a card that's associated with Pluto, the planet Pluto, and that all three planets are super connected right now. So you may be feeling like your path gets delayed in this process as you realize that certain aspects of what you're dealing with are not favorable. Next, we have the Three of Wands. Likely, many of you will face some kind of reprioritization of not only where you want to go, but like the goals that you're focused on and where you see things heading for yourself. Then we have the Five of Swords. Somebody's going to do something that's going to make you super uncomfortable. Somebody's going to say something. And because we're talking about Virgo, I'm thinking that it's someone close to home, someone who's a good friend, someone who you would expect to be copacetic, be nice. Someone's going to be disagreeable, and it's going to kind of break your trust in a situation or in them. And then we have the Four of Swords. I think that you see this coming anyway, though. So when it happens, I just think that it's going to be confirmation. The main message that I get for this whole transit of Venus in Virgo is this acceptance of circumstances as they are and the real need to rely on yourself to carry you through to when Venus enters Libra, which is August 7th. So it's like, yeah, you get your confirmation. There's frustration that this causes delays because you just wanted to move forward. I remember in one of the sections we were talking about arguing over things that are unimportant, right? And seeing that wastefulness in terms of nitpicking things that are unnecessary to be upset about. And then at a certain point, you have to choose yourself over troubleshooting a problem that shouldn't be a problem to begin with. So you remember this card from the part of the tarot reading when we were just doing it just a moment ago. It's the Knight of Cups. This is a part of the best transit that I think that Venus in Virgo is experiencing. So on July 24th, 2026, Mercury, the planet of communication, sextiles Venus. Mercury will have just finished its retrograde cycle, and the sextile is from the position at which Jupiter joined Venus last year, the planetary cycle from 2025 to 2026. This just ended a month ago. So Mercury retrograde is about going back. And I know there's a lot of predictions that are saying they'll contact you during Mercury retrograde. But I think this is an example where I think the contacting is going to happen right after Mercury retrograde. Mercury is not forming any aspects to any planets when it is retrograde. The first aspect it forms is to Venus when it goes direct on July 23rd. We'll cover more about this in another video, but because this is connecting to the Jupiter and Venus planetary cycle, that is all about love and relationships, that covers the period of 2025 to 2026. It's likely that this contact communication is going to be an answer to certain questions that came up from this Jupiter and Venus planetary cycle. In other words, if you have relationship issues that came up for you in the last year and they're sort of up in the air, if there was some kind of break in communication where one person or both people were not able to communicate well, Mercury retrograde in Cancer may unlock this. And when it creates the sextile to Venus on July 24th, this may lead to opening of communication. So if you're not in no contact with someone, and you want contact with that person, or if there's outstanding things for you to talk about, it is this transit on July 24th that might actually activate it. We'll talk about Mercury retrograde in another video. And this is probably the best transit that we have going on for Venus retrograde. Not Venus retrograde, Venus in Virgo. So one of the most important activations for this transit is the lunar activation when the moon enters Virgo on July 17th and will stay in the sign until the 19th. The moon is going to join Venus and the south node in Virgo during that time, and it's a lucky time. And when you become very aware of what's happening in your life and what the Venus South Node conjunction is all about, we're going to have a three-way conjunction between the moon, Venus, and the South Node. So you're going to have a very insightful moment on July 17th, 2026. The Venus South Node transit is very transformative and it's very intense. So when the moon passes this position, it really shows you what you're in for over the next 6 months. This is when the energy locks in. So you really feel present in what's happening around you, what's happening in love, what's happening in relationships. You're able to see everything for what it is. This is when you will understand your situation. So this is when you will look, especially if you're experiencing a lack of clarity or understanding, you're going to understand exactly who is who, what is what's going on. You can make your informed decision there. Then, actually, I think a better day to make a decision is July 24th instead of the 17th, but take what you figure out on July 17th especially and apply it in July 24th. That's going to be a very important week. You're going to understand essentially what is good and what is not good. So that's going to be your moment of clarity, July 17th through the 24th. Okay, so let's do a little tarot card reading to finish off. We have transformation, so we're in for a change. This is the card of Scorpio, where Venus retrograde begins this year. So Virgo and Scorpio are a sextile, which is a favorable opening angle. So the transit in Virgo is essentially an activation point for the retrograde cycle. It sort of initiates the energy that Venus in Scorpio is going to review and refine in the fall. So we have the Seven of Pentacles. I've done this before. I called this the 8 of Pentacles. 7 of Pentacles, patience and planning. 7 of Discs. And then we have the Tower. Oh, we're getting big cards. So there they come. Okay. So there's going to be a disruption to what you had expected. We already knew that from the astrology. Oh, but you get your wish fulfillment. So you get something that you want in the situation. I want to keep reading these cards because we have so many drastic cards here on the table. These are very good cards, the Psychic Tarot, in order to mellow them out. Let's see. So we have the Ace of Pentacles, prosperity begins. See, even though Venus in Virgo is kind of a pain in the butt this year, it's leading to good things. Essentially what it's saying is that you're going to have to let go of some people and situations that are not aligned with your highest good. And then we have the 6 of Swords that's moving on towards what you want, towards a new direction. What else are we getting here? We have 9 of Pentacles, material harvest. So that's Venus in Virgo right there. That's the card. Material harvest, material prosperity, choosing wealth over BS relationships that don't go anywhere. Let's take a look at the Lenormand. So we're going to pick 5 cards. We have the House. So some type of change involving a house, something involving your family or lineage, important long-term decisions. That's verified by the Seven of Pentacles, long-term decisions being made. Then we have the 33 key. Some kind of opportunity is opening up for you. Expect the story arc or the event to transpire from now until February 20th, 2027, when we have the eclipse. Venus, once she passes the south node, she is going to be reviewing some shadow sides of the signs that she's in. So some of the darker things that you need to take care of in order to improve your life. We have the bouquet also. Some kind of gift is being offered. And then we have fish with opportunity. So as difficult as it is, I think the difficulty is in shifting away from relationships, shifting the focus away from relationships towards a focus on material prosperity, success in your career, making the hard decisions towards your abundance, and turning your back on the things that are crumbling anyway. In fact, in terms of cards that had to do with healthy relationships, I don't know if you noticed, but there wasn't anything here. So it was all about you. It was all about your success. It was all about moving forward despite whatever is coming up. Now, in the previous reading, I think this is important, the Knight of Cups came up. So expect to hear from the person that you're wondering about, especially if you're in no contact, and especially in a situation where you anticipate that there will be contact, or essentially that the separation, you kind of know it's temporary. And yet, remember this card? This was really strong and resonant from the Mary L. Tarot. And so this card was telling me that someone is going to say or do something, someone or a situation that is going to be heavily upsetting to you. And you're just going to be like, UTF, what is this? Let's take a look at the Morgan Greer Tarot. So we have the 10 of Swords. That's Sun in Gemini. So this may be referring to the period when the Sun was in Gemini earlier this year. We have the Fool again, so we have a confirmation of a new beginning. That's really powerful when there's a Tower also. So you're definitely moving in a new direction. The message from the rest of the reading that really resonates here is that you have to be comfortable with some degree of uncertainty. And then we have the Knight of Wands, Sag, Leo, or Aries. 8 of Swords, when there's a situation that you don't know how to navigate, that there's significant amount of difficulty attached to a person or a situation. Things are in your way. They're a source of distraction and you have to get through them. 7 of Pentacles. Again, we had this card already, so long-term focus, long-term goals. What this could be actually saying is that there's a situation around you that you have to put away. You have to separate yourself from because it's creating too much chaos in your life and undermining your stability. And then we have the Queen of Wands, Sag, Leo, or Aries, sometimes with Pisces, Cancer, or Scorpio energy. This is kind of like standing within your own truth, shining bright, turning your back on the things that are not flowing well, seeking the path of the least resistance so that you can get to where you are going. So eye on the prize is really the message here. Since there's a relationship aspect to this, here is the Romance Angels card that I chose. And I think it's pretty resonant for this whole transit. Love yourself first. Your self-respect makes you more romantically attractive. So I think that as uncomfortable as it may be, whether this is in love, romance, or friendship, or even at work, you have to take care of yourself under Venus and Virgo transit because some real opportunities are coming your way when Venus enters Libra. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this was fulfilling and I hope you liked it. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And thank you for watching. Take care. Bye.